Grill the meat on high heat for 1 minute, then decrease the heat a bit and grill it for another minute. After grilling, wrap it in foil and let it rest for about 5 minutes. Bloody hornbull steak!
Previously, he had been a down-bad office worker with no real ambition until one fateful day. He was summoned into a new world, but to his surprise, his only skill was something called online shopping. Although it seemed useless at first, he soon learned that he can use it to rizz up even the strongest of monsters. Travelling along his legendary familiar, Fel is our protagonist, Mukuda, who despite having a cheat skill, still relies on his slaves to do his work. As he travels, Fel informs him that ahead are some monsters who shouldn't dare to challenge him. He tells Mukuda he will kill all of those who try to stop him, urging him to hold on. Then suddenly Fel comes to a stop, allowing multiple two-headed monsters to emerge. With a snake hanging out their butts, Fel asks them if they really want double penetration. Mukuda, on the other hand, is too scared to bear witness to Fel's strength, so he runs back like a scaredy cat. After he does, Fel gets to work, slicing one of the monsters in half, making Mukuda wonder how Fel can be so overpowered. Once Fel does this attack, the others are too scared to fight back anymore, so they run away. Mukuda then asks how he even did that, to which Fel starts yapping about his skill. In Mukuda's hands is his pet slime, Sui, who not only eats his trash but also cleans his plates. Later that night, after a long day of travelling, Mukuda walks around anxiously, making sure his guard is up while in this territory. Fel notices this, so he tells Mukuda to stop being such a wussy and cook him dinner already. Sui also joins in, ordering Mukuda to hurry it up, but rather than show hostility, he is happy to see Sui wants to eat. Eventually, Mukuda stops standing around and gets to work on cooking, where he asks Fel how much longer they have to be in this forest. With each of the monsters in this forest being a bit strange, he is forced to use snake meat as the main ingredient. He starts by slicing up all the meat and treating it as if it was chicken meat. As he makes it, he hopes it doesn't turn out bad like some of his other dishes, never having cooked snake meat before. Finally, after throwing a bunch of random stuff into a pot, Mukuda starts cooking the meat up, explaining how he is doing it in the process. The only question is how he knows all of these recipes, him being a single loner in his last life. Despite this, when he tries the meal he made, he is stunned by its flavour. Fel joins in, taking a bite of it and demanding that Mukuda does his job to cook more. Knowing he can't stand against them, Mukuda keeps cooking until eventually he runs out of meat to serve. With Fel and Sui eating everything there is, Mukuda falls to the ground exhausted, with them not saving him any food. The following day, when they get back on the road, Fel suddenly stops. He points out a healing mushroom to Mukuda, explaining they are extremely rare. With there being tons of these mushrooms all around, Mukuda gets to work, picking all in sight. Sui notices this, so he asks to help, when in reality he is just eating the shrooms. Before we continue, let's take a moment to answer the question of the day. What is your favourite anime from the 2010 S? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out in the next video. Now back to the recap. After he eats all these shrooms, he starts to have a revelation, so he starts glowing. Mukuda decides to inspect him to see what's going on, where he learns Sui has learned the healing abilities from the shrooms. This makes Mukuda wonder what other skills Sui can learn, so he picks him up, thinking he will forever be his partner. He then asks Sui to use his new skill, but once he tries, nothing happens. It takes a few minutes to do, but eventually Sui makes an arm that is able to spawn in a recovery liquid. Mukuda finds it strange at first, but once he inspects it, he learns it's a high-grade recovery potion that can cure all injuries. Because of how rare this is, Mukuda makes sure to harvest all of the medicine. Fel comments on this skill, telling Sui in all his life he has never seen a slime that can produce medicine. Following this, Mukuda continues to traverse the forest until one day he encounters a griffin. He thinks it's the end of him, but to his surprise, the griffin speaks with him, bowing down to Fel. It tells Fel that it acknowledges its skills and wishes to prove its own in battle. Although he is hesitant at first, Fel accepts this challenge, telling the griffin he should be ready to die. Mukuda, on the other hand, urges Fel to spare the griffin, thinking he could make use of it in the future. The battle then begins, and it seems Fel has things under control, but the griffin is too quick. The two continue engaging in battle, making it seem like neither side will let up. That is until Fel decides to get serious, using a wind tornado to trap the griffin. Makuda stops him before the griffin dies, but it seems like it's too late for it. Makuda eventually realizes that he can use the potion Sui made, so he does, healing it in the process. He then tells the griffin that he fought well, pointing to a small wound inflicted. This makes the griffin overjoyed, so he calls down his squad, showing he is the leader of the pack. He then stands in front of them and thanks Fel for allowing him to show his strength in battle. He then gives Makuda a feather, urging him not to enter this forest again or else. Makuda ignores this warning and decides to cook up in the exact spot the battle took place. He starts by making some orc meat into small clumps, pressing it down in the process. He then puts it on the fire and begins cooking it until it is deep fried. To finish it off, he slaps the sauce on it, handing it over to Fel and Sui to try. Like usual, they dig into it without hesitation, showing Makuda's cooking never seems to get old. Despite it being orc meat, it is still delicious, causing everybody to ask for seconds. As if he were their housewives, he gets right back to cooking until Fel asks Makuda if he has offered the goddess any food recently. He tries to hide the fact that he hasn't, but Fel forces him to give the goddess food. The following day, they finally exit the forest, hoping to soon arrive into the kingdom of Leonhardt. Before they enter, Makuda tells Fel that they are soon to be out of meat, so he starts dashing through the open fields, in hope of finding some. After some time, they find a carriage being attacked by monsters, so Makuda urges Fel to save them. Upon arriving, they find tons of people, so Fel decides to take matters into his own hands. He screams out and tells them if they don't surrender, then he will eat them all whole. This leads to Makuda meeting with the group, asking the adventurers why they can't deal with some lowly bandits. Following these events, Makuda decides to travel alongside the group, then going to the same location. As they travel, the low-level adventurers talk about Makuda behind his back, wondering if Makuda is the famed warrior. Apparently because he has been travelling with Fel and presenting large quantities of materials, rumours about him have been spreading. Once they arrive at a camping ground for the night, Makuda decides to start cooking up for Fel. He asks him what he wants, and as usual he wants nothing but meat. Makuda tells him that he is running low on meat, but he still has a little bit from each monster left over. Because he promised to cook a lavish meal for Fel, he decides to put his all into this meal. He explains all the random steps, making it look much easier than it is, until as usual he ends up making a perfect dish. With there being multiple different types of meat, Sui and Fel are nothing less than happy. Makuda then begins cooking the other types of meat, and while he does, the adventurers smell this. When they walk over to see what's going on, they are stunned to see Makuda cooking some of the most luxurious meat. They try it, and once they do, they all become pigs, stuffing their faces with as much food as they can. This cycle repeats with Makuda feeding everybody until he runs out of meat entirely. Like last time, however, Makuda didn't get a single bite of his own dish, making him depressed. He decides to mope around and go to bed, leaving the low-level adventurers to watch over the bandits. The bandits then start demanding some food themselves, but Makuda reminds them he has Fel on his side. The following day, they finally arrive at the city of Carolina, the 5th largest city within the Leonhardt kingdom. Makuda notices how good the vibes are around town, and she feels welcomed inside. As he walks around town, he sees the bandits getting turned in, wondering what's to happen to them. Then some big bulky man, who despite his looks is actually weak, tells Makuda he is heading to the Adventurers Guild. Makuda follows suit and flirts with the clerk, but she soon informs him his card is voided. Because he neglected doing any quests within the requested time frame, he was demoted from G rank down to F rank. With this being said, he can re-register and cheat the system, so he does. As he registers this time, he introduces Sui as his second familiar, gaining laughs from all around. Later that day, he tries to get his monsters butchered, almost being out of meat. One of the adventurers overheard this, so he asks to accompany him, not knowing just how strong Fel really is. When he presents the large number of monsters before them, they are nothing less than surprised. The adventurers tell Makuda that they have never seen this amount of monsters before, thinking it would be impossible to even defeat some of them. The butcher, on the other hand, is fired up, thanking Makuda for presenting him with so many materials. He tells Makuda that he will have it all cleaned up in a couple of days, claiming to be the best dissector in the world. He displays this skill by slicing up the meat of the various monsters, telling Makuda they are very delicious. After seeing all of these feats, the adventurers ask what kind of meat they ate the previous night. Makuda nonchalantly explains it as various high-ranking monsters, making the adventurers feel bad. They apologize for eating such high-quality materials, not knowing that Makuda eats that good on the daily. The lead adventurer then tells Makuda because he fed him such good food, if he ever needs something within the city, to just use his name. Following these events, Makuda lies down, wondering what he should do the next day. he questions whether he should even be an adventurer, and as he does, a voice starts ringing in his ears. This voice belongs to the goddess, demanding sweets. See, she had given him a blessing previously in exchange for him transporting sweets to her home. Little does Makuda know this goddess is in reality just a big glutton. That's why when he prays to her and presents the food, he does it as if it was a bother. The next day when he heads into the guild, he looks around for which quest to take on, wishing he could do something that wasn't picking herbs. One of the quests includes hunting goblins, but Makuda thinks it would be too difficult to defeat them. Upon hearing this, Fel tells him that he needs to go to the goblins or else it will take forever to rank up. This leads to the two arguing, Fel revealing that he wants Makuda to rank up already so he can go to the sea. Fel thinks the sooner he ranks up, the sooner he will be able to eat the food in the sea. However, with Makuda not budging, Fel decides to see what Sui's opinion on the matter is. Like himself, Sui wants to eat good food, so he recommends the goblins, causing Makuda to try and convince him otherwise. Sui tells him that he has nothing to worry about with goblins, reminding him he has Fel alongside him. With this being said, Makuda takes up the goblin subduing quest, wondering if he can really handle them. He realizes that the goblin quest is the fastest way to rank up, so he decides to finally accept that he will be fighting goblins. Once he finds one of the goblins, Sui starts the attack, defeating them all instantly. This cycle repeats until Makuda eventually gets tired of cutting off the goblin's ears. He cries out to be done with this already, but it only attracts more goblins. Like last time, Sui does all of the work, forcing Makuda to do all of the dirty work. After defeating hundreds of goblins, Makuda is finally ready to head back, wishing he didn't have to chop all of their ears off. He does it regardless and wonders if he should just leave this large pile of goblins sitting around. Sui then recommends that he burn them all, showing he has the ability to transform. Makuda then inspects Sui's status window and learns he has evolved into something called Big Slime. Not only can he become much larger, but he can disperse himself into tons of smaller slimes. With all of these bodies, he easily eats up the goblins, leaving nothing behind. With all of this done, Makuda makes a meal before heading back and realizes with all of these goblin ears he already has enough points to rank up. When he arrived back at the guild and presented all of the goblin ears, the clerks were stunned. They took all of their efforts and combined them to try and count the ears, wondering how someone could farm so many. This leads to Makuda being forced to meet with the guildmaster along with Fel. Upon meeting the man, the guildmaster introduces himself as Willem, a senile old man. He tells Makuda that he has been hearing a lot about goblins missing, revealing he is the reason. He then compliments Fel, telling him he must be super strong to beat so many. Sui then jumps out and causes Makuda to explain that he is also a strong familiar. The guildmaster finally gets to the main point, telling Makuda that the royal capital has a letter for him. It informs him that the country is allowing him to stay within it freely, as long as he helps them out in times of need. With this being said, the guildmaster proposes to rank Makuda up for his efforts all the way to C rank. In return for this, he asks for a couple of personal requests, making Makuda wonder what it could be. He quickly explains that it's nothing too difficult, asking if he can have Fel deal with some AS rank quests. He then pulls out a book and shows Makuda various quests that have been sitting around for a while. Now with this done, Makuda asks him if he can get more monsters butchered, surprising the guildmaster. With there being various high-level monsters that even they have never seen, they tell him they are unsure how they can even purchase them. The butcher tells him although he can do all of them, he can butcher some of the monsters for him, including a blue ogre. He explains that this monster is a rare S-rank monster that he has never seen before. This fires the butcher up while the guildmaster wonders how he can exploit Makuda to the fullest. Following these events, Makuda heads to his shed, where he usually does his cooking to make a new dish. As usual, he knows exactly how to cook everything to perfection, showing he is just that guy. While cooking, Sui decides to jump in and help him until all of the work is eventually completed. To top this off, he cooks up some vegetables, ultimately making a stir-fry. To reward himself for all this hard work, he buys a beer off his online store, hoping to drink away his sorrows. As he eats, Sui and Fel demand seconds, causing Makuda to get back to cooking. Once they all eat their fill, he talks with Sui, telling him he has grown a lot since they first met. While talking with Sui, he realizes that Fel is cramped inside of the small barn, so he thinks of other options. Eventually he gets the idea of spawning in a futon, making Fel more relaxed than ever. The following day, Makuda is finally presented with his guild card, ranking all the way up to C rank. On top of this, he earned a large sum of money from killing all the monsters, raking up over 1900 coins. The guildmaster explains that this is the biggest deal he has ever done before in the guild's history. He then presents two quests to Makuda, one being a metal lizard and the other being a bull. He informs him that these two monsters have been taking over a certain region, making trade difficult. With the lizard having a strong skin, nobody has taken on this quest because they are unable to damage it. The bull, on the other hand, walks around in packs, making it difficult for anyone to take on the quest. Once Fel learns of this, all he thinks about is the richness within the meat, so they head out right away. Before they leave, Makuda suggests that they should wait one more day before leaving so they can get a fresh start. He tells Fel that he wants to visit the fat merchant first. After some time, he eventually arrives at the merchant's store, where he informs him he is looking for a purse. The merchant asks if he is a girl, but shows him some bags anyway. With each having different prices and being made of different materials, Makuda is unsure what to buy. Makuda then asks the fat merchant if he can let his slime choose, it being sleeping within his bag. Sui looks at all the bags and eventually decides on one of them, making it his new home. While this happens, Fel sleeps, giving Makuda more time to look around. With him recently getting almost 2,000 gold coins, he balls out, buying whatever he desires. After purchasing a couple of items, he eventually decides to just completely redo his outfit. Once he gets to the register to ring it all up, the fat merchant tells Makuda he doesn't have to pay for anything. He reminds him of the luxurious food he ate, telling him it is no problem. Following this, the merchant asks Makuda if he still has any of the black serpent skin that he ate the meat from. He tells Makuda that there isn't very much of its skin being sold anymore, making it one of the highest grade materials. As he guides Makuda out the door, he tells him that he will buy some of the monsters as well, asking him not to only sell to the guild. Now with this finished up, Makuda heads back home with all of his new merch. Like usual, he finishes the day off by cooking up a new meal, never making the same thing twice. This time, instead of them eating all of his food, he actually gets a plate of his own. The following day he heads out, starting off with trying to subdue the lizard. At first he is unsure of its location, but with Fel's help they find it instantly. Makuda tries to stay outside during the battle but is forced in by Fel. Once entering, they find a glowing gecko, making him wonder if this is the correct one. Upon inspection, he learns this is a mithril lizard rather than the metal lizard they are supposed to fight. Fel explains that this will be a tough battle, mithril deflecting any kind of magical attack. This makes Makuda think he has no chance against it, but Fel displays that even if it can reflect normal magic, it cannot reflect his magic. Makuda then puts the lizard in his inventory, and soon finds a piece of mithril ore lying on the ground. He decides to harvest it alongside Sui until he realizes the potential uses of it. He wonders if he should make a suit of armor out of the ore, but is stopped by Fel. He tells him that nothing is stronger than his barrier, so there is no point in making armor. They then head outside to look around for the bulls in the next quest. Like last time, Makuda hides in the back, allowing Fel to do all of the work. He explains this to Sui, who get enraged, telling Makuda he also wants to help fight the bulls. Makuda then goes to watch the fight take place, but within an instant, all of the bulls get taken down. Sui explains that they combined their attacks to defeat them within an instant, making Makuda wonder if anything is a match for them. As he places the bulls in his inventory, he starts to realize they managed to haul in more than they needed. Because of this, he reveals they will be eating lots of this bull meat. To show this, he cooks it up and makes it into sandwiches, pleasing Sui and Fel alike. As they eat, Makuda drinks some cola, drawing Sui's attention. He asks what it is, so he decides to just show him rather than explain it. After pouring it into a bowl for Sui, he finishes it instantly, causing Fel to want to try it out as well. Upon taking the first sip, he ends up finishing it off, telling Makuda it was a nice sensation. Because he drank so much cola, Fel begins burping tons, making Sui and Makuda have a good laugh. Later that night, when they get back to the guild and present the mithril lizard, the workers are stunned. They tell Makuda that a mithril lizard is extremely rare, it last being spotted over 400 years ago. He explains that in total there are only 3 mithril ores in the world, so not only is the monster rare, but its materials are as well. Because of this, Willem explains that he needs to keep the lizard to present to the king. This may seem bad, but the guildmaster informs Makuda that he could easily get 5,000 gold coins for something like this. He then moves on to asking about the bulls, which he is also stunned by when Makuda presents a pile of them. Following this, Makuda walks through town, asking Fel and Sui what they want to eat. They tell him they want more of the bull meat, so he gets to work, making sure to perfectly season it. Upon completion, the usual happens where everybody is stunned by how good it is. Makuda in particular comments that this is some of the best meat he's ever had. Fel, on the other hand, claims it's better than even A5 Wagyu, asking for seconds. Makuda knew this would happen, so he presented more of the meat, topping it all off with soy sauce. Once they all finish eating, Fel tells Makuda that he will never leave him, saying there's no way he can eat raw meat again. After all of this, Makuda heads home, where he realizes that he has neglected the goddess again. Because of this, he buys all of the goods he can, presenting the goddess with tons of sweets. When he does, instead of just hearing her voice, he hears other females' voices. They tell him that they are also goddesses who will give him his blessing in exchange for some food. The goddesses explain that his current blessing is a weak one, telling him they will give him much stronger powers. Kishale, the goddess of earth in particular, tells Makuda that she will give him as much of her powers as she can. Agni, the fire goddess, follows suit, telling him she will make him invincible. With all of these offers for his food, the wind goddess argues with them, claiming the goddess of earth will interfere if they give his blessings. Makuda then agrees with her, and tells them he doesn't want to draw suspicion from others. Despite all of this, the goddesses don't care, giving Makuda their blessings anyways. After all this happens, the water goddess Rusalka joins in as well, asking for food. She tells him that although he has no use of her blessing, she still wants to eat sweets. This causes her to start crying, thinking she won't get any sweets. After Makuda overhears all of this, he realizes he needs to do something, so he ultimately decides to give her snacks as well, with one condition. He tells Rusalka to bless his slime, knowing it has a high water affinity. Upon giving her blessing, the other goddesses ask if it's really alright, revealing she gave Sui a high-grade blessing. Now, with everybody satisfied, Makuda starts by ordering them tons of food. The following day, Makuda decides to test out his blessing and is nothing less than stunned. With his power increasing tenfold, he wonders if he could actually deal with some monsters himself. Sui, in particular, is able to use water magic like no other, instantly destroying a tree. After a day of playing around and trying new magics, Fel emerges with a black serpent, asking for a reward for finding one. The next morning, when Makuda wakes up in his homemade shelter, he questions what he should do today. With him ranking up to C rank, he tells Fel they don't need to do any hunting today. Instead, he proposes they give the fat merchant the serpent, along with giving the guild the other materials. He starts with the build, picking up some money and meat from the butcher. After he receives all of the goods, he presents a black serpent to the butcher, asking if he can dissect this too. He accepts his request, so in the meantime, Makuda decides to cook up lunch for them. This time he whips out a meat grinder, hoping to mince the meat easier than usual. Upon seeing this, Sui tries as well, making it look much easier than it really is. Eventually they finish grinding all of the meat, so Makuda moves on to cooking the other ingredients. This time he makes sure to make enough for Fel and Sui to have as much as they want. Instead of the usual just cooking, he decides to make the meat into patties, revealing he intends to make burgers. After a few more steps, he eventually finishes cooking the meat, so he makes fries to go alongside them. With a unique look, they all dig in, claiming it's one of the best dishes Makuda has made thus far. Once they finish eating, Makuda realizes he hasn't taken a single bath during this life. Because of this realization, he decides to purchase some goods to properly take care of himself. On top of this, he thinks it might be good to give the merchant some goods as a gift. Upon completing this, he heads to meet with the merchant, who offers him 50 gold coins for the black serpent skin. After this is out of the way, Makuda shows his merchant guild card and asks him if he can help him out with something. He presents a couple of vials of various soaps and conditioners, asking if they would sell well. He explains each item and its uses, making the merchant stunned by how many different new items he has made. The fat merchant then informs Makuda that he has a wedding coming up soon, asking if he can buy these as gifts. He tells Makuda his wife loves bathes, so she would also love these as gifts. Upon hearing this, Makuda asks him if he can see his bathtub, to see if he could get a go at it. The fat merchant then guides him into his bathroom and explains how his bath was made. With it costing well over 300 gold coins, it seems like it would be impossible to buy for most, but not Makuda. After looking around his house all day, Makuda finally decides to leave, offering the merchant the soaps as a parting gift. The following day, Makuda arrives, putting the merchant at ease. He tries to stop Makuda, but before he can speak, a hot girl named Marie runs up on Makuda, asking where he got the soaps. She tells him that last night her husband used the items, making her jealous. The merchant explains that he couldn't wait for the wedding to give them as gifts, explaining he used them himself. His wife then begins yapping again, showing how much she appreciates the products Makuda presented. With this out of the way, the merchant asks Makuda if he has any more of the goods, wanting to sell them in his shop. As he suggests this idea, his wife interrupts him, claiming the goods are too valuable to sell to others. She tells Mukuda she will buy all of the products he has, showing she has no intent of backing down. Mukuda eventually folds and gives them a crate of the soaps, letting him finally leave the shop. He then meets back up with Fel and Sui, explaining he wants to go to a dungeon. Fel recommends that he go to the guild then, and asks the guildmaster if he knows of any dungeons. Upon entering the guildmaster's room, he is stunned for a different reason, however, being presented with 5,800 gold coins in exchange for the mithril lizard. This happy talk soon comes to an end, however, when the hot clerk enters the room, telling the guildmaster a group of wyverns have emerged. The guildmaster explains that they must be attacking to try and get the bull's meat. After running for a solid 15 seconds, they arrive to the guild hall, where there are tons of injured adventurers. They think their lives are over, but thanks to Mukuda's high-grade potion, all of their wounds are healed instantly. This healing continues until everybody is healthy again, causing the guildmaster to make an announcement. He tells everyone that he is issuing an emergency quest to defeat the wyverns. This raises the spirits of everyone in the hall, but their excitement is soon stopped when Fel enters. He tells everyone that he will deal with the wyverns himself, claiming it will be a good exercise. Fel then asks the guildmaster if he will allow this, to which he does. Fel reveals that the real reason he wants to subdue them is to eat the meat they hold. The guildmaster then accepts his request, telling Mukuda their lives are in his hands. With this, Mukuda rides along with Fel until he eventually arrives to an open field with tons of various wyverns. He tries to back down, but Fel informs him he is ready to fight, asking Sui to get on his back. He then dashes into the middle of the pack and gives Sui various orders on how to take down the wyverns. They then defeat all of the wyverns with ease, while Mukuda is seen hiding behind a rock. Once they finish this up, Mukuda decides to do the only thing he is good for, cooking. As usual, he makes an amazing dish, satisfying not only himself but the others as well. While he eats this luxurious food, the guild sit around, wondering if he will be alright. As the guildmaster waits, he thinks that they failed their subduction, taking a long time. Mukuda explains that he beat them a while ago, informing him he was just eating dinner. The guildmaster then applauds him for his efforts, telling him it would have taken half of the guild's lives. Mukuda tries to hide the fact that it took him a while because he was eating, but Fel and Sui expose him instantly. With the wyverns being taken care of, the guards decide to announce everybody's safety. Meanwhile, Mukuda meets with the guildmaster, asking him how much he can get from the wyverns. He tells them he only wants the meat, but to his surprise, the guild informs him he doesn't have enough money to buy all of them. Because of this, he will only buy half, leaving Mukuda to head home. Right before he heads to sleep, the goddesses call upon him, demanding he give them a blessing already. Each of the gods try and convince him to give them more, but Mukuda ultimately decides to just give them a load of goods. The Earth Goddess in particular tries to get some of Mukuda's soap while hiding it from the others. The Water Goddess as well asks for some of his homemade cooking, also asking him to keep it a secret. Mukuda then explains to all of them he will just give it to them at the same time, not being able to keep it a secret. With only Agni not asking for a secret, she gets angry, also demanding something specific. The following day, when Mukuda walks through town, he overhears everybody talking about him. This doesn't faze him, however, so he continues on his path until he arrives at the bath shop. He tells the clerk he wants the best of the best, so he begins showing him the options. With all the tubs being made from different materials, he is unsure which to buy until he is presented with a golden tub. He recognizes it as one he would use in his past life, but he ignores it anyways. He tells the clerk he wants the green one, pointing to it in the process. This stuns the clerk, so he presents a payment plan, assuming that Mukuda is a peasant. This angers Mukuda, so he pulls out a large sum of money and hands it to the clerk. He then loads the tub up into his inventory and heads out. Upon looking around a bit, he finds a good spot to build his bath, leaving Fel to do the hunting. It doesn't take him long to draw an area up where he will build, which is followed by him making a large wall. After making a wall around, he places the tub and asks Sui to fill it with water. Once it's filled up, he throws a fireball into the water, hoping it will heat it up to the perfect temperature. Now with all this done, he gets into the bath and goes crazy about washing himself. With the bath being super relaxing, he takes his time soaking up the water after he finishes washing himself. Following this bath, he decides to cook up some lunch for his group. This time he decides to use the wyvern's meat, never having eaten it before in this world. With his skills, he easily makes a delicious meal, but to his surprise, Fel is still nowhere to be seen. He thinks he must just be out hunting, so waits to eat, instead cooking up a side meal. After a little work, he ends up with a wyvern stew drawing in Fel. When Fel gets back, however, instead of being his usual self, he presents a huge monster. He explains that the wyverns were too weak, so he decided to fight against an earth dragon. This makes Makuda wonder what the extent of his powers is, so he asks him what the monster is again. Fel tells him it's just a dragon, explaining their meat tastes really good. This makes Makuda realize how big of a feat this is, claiming there's no way he can sell this to the guild. He explains that they are barely able to purchase A-rank monsters, so there is no way they can buy a dragon. As they talk, Fel smells the stew, so he decides to dig in. While he does, Makuda looks through the shop and eventually decides he needs to treat Fel a bit better. He buys a grooming tool to get the excess hair off, then moves on to washing him off. His efforts help, but it could be better, so he asks Sui if he has any ideas. Sui then takes a shower with his arm, allowing Makuda to give Fel a true cleaning. Once he finishes washing Fel up, he uses wind magic to dry him, revealing his mighty presence all clean. Following this, Fel demands he get to eat a good meal for staying still for so long. Makuda agrees, so he starts cooking, eventually making more of the wyvern stew for him and Sui. Some things never seem to change, however, with Fel and Sui demanding seconds after a few seconds of initially getting their food. After this happens, Makuda goes to present the dragon to the guild, but soon learns it's no good. The butcher explains that the dragon's materials are way too valuable to use, so he can't possibly buy it. The guildmaster then begins thinking, eventually revealing he knows someone who could dissect the dragon. With this guildmaster being in a faraway land, Makuda sets out to soon embark on yet another adventure.